Right here on the main stage, I want you to meet now one of the most outstanding CCU 2013 graduates, political science major, cross-country athlete, golfer. The way he skis, I wanted to throw my skis away. Former Heritage Foundation intern, former Republican National Convention page at the convention a year ago in Tampa, and the director of the Youth Wave project that has put so many teens and 20-somethings in the hall today at the summit. Meet now, to introduce and moderate the panel on Young Conservative Voices, my friend Jonathan Feiner.
Good morning. Just kidding. Are you all awake? That's what that question was for. Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Let me just start off by being frank. The mainstream media is biased, and they're telling America what to think. Francesca Chambers, editor of Red Alert Politics, an online publication by and for young conservatives, aims to combat this. And as a veteran of several political campaigns and organizations, Francesca is quickly rising through the ranks of American journalism. She was recently named to the DC GOP's first ever 35 under 35 list. She's also appeared on ABC, MSNBC, CNN, and many more news outlets. She and her husband, Michael, who is here, have been married for only a week, and we're honored to have her. Jesse Blumenthal, a native of Toronto, Canada, recently joined Engage, a consulting firm where Jesse is a client strategist. Prior to Engage, Jesse graduated from Claremont McKenna College. His degree was in politics, philosophy, and economics. Try saying that 5 times fast. I don't do it now, but for future reference. He worked in then House Minority Leader John Boehner's office, and then transitioned to the American Enterprise Institute, where he acted as their public affairs manager. A Washington Nationals fan and political junkie, Jesse is also an accomplished writer and blogger. At the ripe young age of 19, Charlie Kirk is making waves across the nation from the oceanless state of Illinois. As a founder and director of Turning Point USA, Charlie reaches thousands of people, young and old, who are disillusioned not only with the party system, but the general state of our nation. He has appeared on Fox News over 25 times, is a contributing writer to townhall.com and breitbart.com. At CPAC 2013, Charlie was a master of ceremonies, a self-proclaimed independent voter that stands on free market, fiscally conservative principles. Charlie is making his voice heard. Professor, author, speaker, and businessman, moderator Kevin Miller is the founder of Colorado Christian University's School of Business and Leadership. He now acts as its executive in residence and teaches class in business and, when you know it, leadership too. He's written the acclaimed book, Freedom Nationally, Virtue Locally, or Socialism, and is founder and co-founder of several successful businesses and is a fellow at the Centennial Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our panel, Conservative Voices of a New Generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Jonathan. So thrilled to be here with you all today. A couple of quick comments about this particular panel. From my viewpoint, this is the most important thing you're going to hear this weekend. It's all well and good what some of the folks that are in the middle of the politics of the day, but the politics of the future rests with these types of individuals you see here, the under 35 types. If you're politically active, you'll know that when you go to a lot of Republican or conservative events, it's the ratio of the above 40 people to the below 40 people is extremely disheartening. I've asked these panelists today to first start off with about 5 minutes each to tell us what this generation, this new generation, should tell the folks that have been around a while to help us cement relationships, intergenerational relationships, tune up our message, be better at what we're doing. I'm an optimist. You will be too after you hear the first 3 of these panelists speak. Charlie, we'll start with Turning Point USA.
Hello. Happy to be here. I call Chicago home, so I'm sorry for everything that you've had to go through with the president that we have given you. I'm not used to speaking without teleprompters, though. That's really weird. Usually in Chicago, I got to force them down. Hearing the news about Detroit, I can't help but think Illinois and Chicago is next. But I'm not here to talk about policy. I'm here to talk about young people. When I think about what happened in November, The young vote went overwhelming to Obama again. And I reflect back on it, I ask myself one fundamental question. And deeper parts of it, but one thing on the surface. Why did the candidates for the Republican Party, why did they not go on stations such as MTV, VH1, and Comedy Central? I ask young people all the time, why didn't you vote for Governor Romney? And a majority of them did not vote for Governor Romney. They supported President Obama, or they didn't vote at all. I said, why would you not support Governor Romney? And they said, how am I supposed to vote for somebody that doesn't even come to the station I watch? Whereas President Obama comes, makes fun of himself a little bit. If you watch the first segment with Jon Stewart and President Obama, they made fun of the fact that President Obama lost the first debate. And that's okay, that's what those shows are for. Although we don't send our candidates there, what kind of message are we sending to the younger generation? I think there's an underlying theme. If we want to not just win elections, but we want to win over a generation, there's one thing, one message I want you to take away with. It's very simple. It's taking something that's abstract and turning it into something that's concrete. Now, what do I mean? Let's look at the NSA scandal. The NSA scandal was something that almost overnight turned something that was extremely abstract into something that was concrete for a younger person. Let me give you an example. When Snowden did what he did and he released those documents, I'm not here to talk about Snowden or what he did or you disagree or agree, but what he did was every single time a young person picked up a phone, said a tweet, sent an email, he or she totally changed the way he did it because they thought they were being watched. You turned something that was abstract, talking about the NSA, which they might not have understood, to something that was concrete overnight. So when we talk about the national debt, that is extremely abstract to a young person. How do we make that concrete? And the left has done this masterfully. They will say to a young person, your student loan interest rates will double if you vote for a Republican. Now that's something concrete, whereas the Republicans will say, we'll create more jobs and help the economy. That's not a winning message. How do we make something that's abstract into something that's concrete? I'll close with one other finishing note. When people ask me, Charlie, do we need to run younger candidates? Is that the solution, run the youngest candidate possible? I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea. I instead think we don't necessarily need younger candidates, but we need better ideas. And we use one very simple example. I went down to the University of Illinois to go hear Ron Paul speak. And Ron Paul's an interesting individual. And it was a college campus, and they had so many students show up to him speak, they had to get an extra room outside of the massive assembly hall in University of Illinois. Now, Ron Paul is 76, 78 years old, and he kind of talks really kooky with his hands like this, and you're trying to tell me he can get more young people in an auditorium than some dynamic young person. But that's because his ideas relate to them. And if you look at the ideas that he believes in, it boils down to one fundamental principle. It's freedom from government. That's what it is. If you look at every single one of his stances, he believes in individual liberty. Now, I'm not here to endorse Ron Paul. I'm not saying the conservative movement needs to become a Ron Paul movement. But if you look at a 78-year-old man who I don't think is particularly charismatic, and he's able to get thousands of young people to flock after him, to put legions behind him because of one fundamental belief, freedom from government. And if we look at young people, I do think if we can make something abstract into something concrete and make that case that you can be free from government to live the life that you choose, that is going to be a winning message for future generations. I'm only 19 years old. I'm fighting this fight every single day. I get to go to college campuses, high schools. I debate professors. I debate socialists. Our organization is doing a lot of exciting things. But what I have learned and I'm taking away is that young people fundamentally support and love liberty. And if we go at that message, we will not only be successful in 2014 or 2016, but we will start to see massive shockwaves in the generation to come that, yes, we can begin to win, because we are losing the war right now. But liberty and the fundamental premise of it is always electorally favorable, and we can win over the next generation. I look forward to this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And how's that for a 19-year-old looking to the future, right? Very good, very good. Francesca, help us.
Hi, I'm Francesca Chambers, and for those of you who don't know what Red Alert Politics is, it's a newer publication by young conservatives for young conservatives. It's owned by Philip Anschutz's company, right here from Colorado, and we are also own the Washington Examiner and the Weekly Standard, so a good line of conservative publications. And roughly a year and a half ago, we had decided that we needed something to reach out to young people. And, you know, I love the other publications we own, the Weekly Standard, the Examiner, but let's be honest. I mean, the Weekly Standard isn't exactly what the young folks are reading, all right? So we decided that we were going to come to where the young people were, and we needed something that was way different than anything conservatives had ever done. It needed to be plugged into social media, it needed to be funny, sometimes edgy, it needed to be something that young people, even if they were politically apathetic or maybe not necessarily socially or fiscally conservative, would come to that publication and maybe walk away more conservative or more open to Republican ideas. And so we launched Red Alert Politics in February of 2012 at CPAC. So we just had our 1-year and 3-month anniversary this last year. So we're very excited about that. We've been doing a lot of really great things with the publication, so I hope you'll check it out, redalertpolitics.com. One of the things we're most proud of is our annual 30 Under 30 list, which we did again for the second time this year. I love the 30 Under 30 list because one of the complaints from the left is, oh, well, why would you ever be a conservative? And there's no young people in the Republican Party or in the conservative movement. The reason we did the 30 Under 30 list was to show everyone across the nation that is false. There are a lot of young people who are pro-fiscal conservative, who have very strong, socially conservative values, who are against like the outrageous government spending and whatnot. But there's not a lot of opportunities that they're being highlighted in the mainstream media or necessarily nationally. So one of the things that we've worked really hard to do is highlight those people so that they can now be getting on national television shows. So they're speaking at conferences like this so that we can show the left that there are young people who are conservative. So that's one of the big things we've done. I would really encourage you to check that out to see some other emerging young people in the movement. But for a second, I want to talk about some of the things that I noticed over the 2012 campaign trail when I was covering the campaign, and what the left was doing versus what the right was doing, and how we can be a little bit more successful with attracting young people. And that's not, again, to say that we haven't been doing a better job. We closed the gap in the last election between President Obama and Mitt Romney by a large gap, by double digits for young people. And we've continued to close it, but we're still not doing enough. One of the biggest things is that conservatives don't do a very good job going to college campuses. Charlie talked about Ron Paul, and so I'd like to expound on that. Well, one of the biggest things that Ron Paul did was he actually came to college campuses. I know this sounds like a radical idea, but perhaps we could get more college students to agree with our ideas and align with our ideas if we were on the college campuses. And again, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of great conservative groups that are on the college campuses. I know that like Young America's Foundation does great works on the college campuses, Leadership Institute, College Republicans. There's a lot of good groups, but we're not doing enough. When I was on the college campuses and even when I was in college, you saw the Obama people there every day, progressives. You had Planned Parenthood, Emily's List, running around the college campuses, but there were no conservative groups on my college campus, and I'm from Kansas. So that should tell you something, being a Kansan, which I would argue is one of the most, if not the most, conservative state in the United States, that there were no conservative groups on my college campus. So that's one thing that we need to do better to reach out to the young people. Two, once we've started the conservative groups on the college campuses, we need to teach those kids how to write. And I know that probably sounds biased as a journalist, but again, perhaps we'd have more journalists who were conservative in the national media if we had more conservative journalists. That's a big problem, is teaching them how to write and also getting them in the mainstream media. Because, I would love some more young conservative journalists working for me, but I'd actually prefer them working for CNN or somewhere else like that where they can have a bigger effect. And then the third thing is that, and I'm glad we're having this panel and everything, but we need to start thinking out of the box about how to include young people at national conferences and to get them there. And one of the things that the left does expertly is they have youth caucuses where young people can get together and they can talk about the ideas and things that they think that they need to change in the movement. And I think we need to start thinking about that a little bit more and having some things like the youth caucuses. So I'm out of time.
Thank you, Francesca. Beautifully done. Jesse.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. It's great to be here, especially with Charlie and Francesca. In the aftermath of the 2012 race, there was a lot of sort of introspection on the right. And the debate back and forth among the pundit class was, is this a message problem, the way we talk about stuff, or is this what we're talking about? And I think the answer is yes. We have a message problem. And we also have a problem in what we're talking about. So I'd like to talk to you about sort of three broad ideas. The first is what's wrong with the conservative brand and where we need to improve. The second is current issues that we talk about and how we can talk about them better. And the third is a new issue set that I think really fits with conservative ideals that you don't hear conservative activists or politicians talking about. The brand's bad. And I think we need to admit that the brand's bad. And I think there are two reasons why. One, it doesn't demonstrate empathy, especially to young voters. They don't feel associated with conservatism. They don't feel that conservatives register the concerns that go on in their life. And the second, as both Charlie and Francesca have talked about, it's just a simple failure to show up. Now, there are good people who are talking about this in meaningful, humanizing ways. I think you saw this with Governor Walker last night. Mike Huckabee, who's going to speak tonight, is one of the best people at making sort of abstract concepts to people who don't necessarily agree with him really relate. But as a movement, I think we need to do a better job with this. We've talked about sort of involvement, and I'd like to draw a parallel to legal immigration reform, right? So we have a lot of legal immigrants, and conservatives ought to celebrate legal immigrants. It's really a fundamental value of this country that the tired, the poor, the folks from around the world who strive for a better life can come here and can achieve a better life. And you know what happens if you go to a citizenship ceremony? You walk outside of the doors right after they've taken the oath of citizenship, and the Democratic Party's there, and liberal activists are there, and people who are eager to embrace new citizens and to share with them their values and to incorporate them into society. I think all too often we pass up these sorts of opportunities to engage. We often talk about these sort of economic issues, right? And I think the problem, the perception problem, is that the conservative movement is broadly seen as a pro-big business, as opposed to a movement that truly embraces free enterprise. We ought to be advocating for the next big business, for the entrepreneur who wants to start their business. If you look at polls of what millennials and youth care about, the prospect of being an entrepreneur is an incredibly desirable idea. And the cronyism that exists between big business and big government is too often washed over by our movement. You know, the Farm Bill is a great example of this. There are a lot of conservative groups who want to talk about problems with SNAP and food stamps and other elements of the Farm Bill, but they don't want to talk about the fact that 80% of the subsidies go to 15% of the farmers, that the people who are by and large receiving these subsidies have a higher net worth and a lower failure rate than the average small business. And until we're willing to take on those type of entrenched interests, until we're trying to really advocate for a free and open system of competition, we're not going to be taken credibly when we want to reform entitlements like SNAP, entitlements like Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. I think that we need to not confuse free markets for carelessness. Adam Smith, who's the godfather of free enterprise, right? The original idea, wrote a book before he wrote about sort of the power of free trade. He wrote A Theory of Moral Sentiments. And he talked about the fact that a man needs a white shirt and polished leather shoes to go into a meeting to be taken credibly. And we as a movement ought to embrace this idea. We ought to embrace the idea that there's a basic level of human decency that's necessary for markets to function. And I think tech issues and open internet and internet freedom issues are really an opportunity where conservatives can engage. You know, you have Heritage Action on one side and the ACLU, two groups that don't traditionally play nicely with each other, coming together and advocating for a digital Fourth Amendment rights. And this goes to some of the issues that Charlie talked about. You saw this in the battle over SOPA, which was really a bill to take over the internet, that you had people from across the political spectrum come together and mobilize. And so internet issues and tech issues aren't just about the tactics we use in campaigns. They're about effectively engaging people in a value that we should all cherish, freedom. Whether you're an activist in a poor repressive regime or a person trying to express yourself and mobilize in a community in a developed country, the internet provides a tremendous opportunity and a unique opportunity to do that. And too often as conservatives, I think we miss that opportunity to engage with those issues.
Thank you, Jesse. I think he's going to invite people to text questions in, and so if you're interested in that, please do so. Francesca, back in the green room, you talked about structure, that we may be missing the boat on understanding structure. What did you mean by that? Could you help us with that?
Well, sure. Well, one thing I think that far too often conservatives and Republicans try to do is they have these election year strategies to try to win young people. And they don't put any effort into it until it's an election year. And they say, oh, I should start this program for young people or this organization for young people because 6 months is far enough time to win the youth vote. And that is just completely false. That's not enough time. Progressives have been working to win the youth vote in 4 years, starting 8 years ago. You know, we're way behind on these things. It takes a lot of time. So I think that that's one big thing is playing a long game and being willing to play the long game and say, oh, well, we lost the youth vote this year. Okay, well, obviously the youth vote isn't winnable, so we should just give up. I don't think we can do that. I think we can say, you know, we lost the youth vote, but it dropped by 11 points. And since the last election, it's dropped by another 12 points, so we're making a difference, and we have to continue playing the long game. I think that's like a big thing, but for a second, I want to talk about the youth caucuses again, because I ran out of time, and I wanted to expound on that, because that's also a structural issue. At a lot of the progressive conferences, and I know sometimes this is seen as pandering, they have caucuses, like a women's caucus and a youth caucus and a Native American caucus or whatever else. You know, it goes on because progressives like to divide people into every group possible. But the youth caucus is actually fantastic. I've seen it done two ways. At the Democratic National Convention, they had a time set aside for like the young people where they had speakers specifically come talk to the young people about issues that were pertinent to them. So they didn't have to bore all the other people who didn't care about those things, but the young people still got what they needed out of that conference. And it was a huge attraction. It was very widely attended by the young people, and I really liked that. And then I was recently at Netroots, which is the Progressives' annual conference, kind of like CPAC. And at Netroots, they had one where it was just young people who met together in a room to talk about the problems that they had with the movement or things that they'd like to see change in the movement and stuff like that. And I also thought that was a really productive thing because I think a lot of the conservative leaders just had no idea that young people felt that way about the movement.
Very well said. Thank you. There's a text in here, and I'm asking Charlie to take it. What are the messages that conservative leaders send that turn off young conservatives? What are the messages that conservative leaders send that turn off young conservatives?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's quite a few, but I'll start with an example everybody knows, and that's the Aiken-Murdoch thing. That's simple. Everybody knows that one. But a deeper example would be I would talk about internet privacy and also internet taxation. And you can see a fundamental divide amongst the conservative movement of certain Republicans that are supporting these internet censorship bills. And then there's other members of Congress, such as Justin Amash, such as Ted Cruz, who was here today, who's fighting for internet freedom. And then you also see some Democrats, such as Dennis Kucinich, when he used to be in Congress, they would agree on that. But if you really want to turn off a young person, talk about taking their internet away or talk about regulating it more. That's the most antagonistic thing you can possibly do to a young person. But even more deeper than that, if you talk in terms of eroding personal liberty or individual liberty, that's the number one thing that will turn off somebody under 35 is the erosion of their right to make decisions. And that's the number one reason why I would think people do not vote for conservatives, because they think, oh, this person's going to take something away from me that I can do today. So.
Go ahead, Jesse.
And if I could jump in on that, I think the internet sales tax in particular is a great example of what we've been talking about. You know, Gallup came out with a poll not too long ago that said 57% of Americans oppose the internet sales tax. And if you look at the young people in that poll, it's 73% oppose it. And if you look at who's advocating for an internet sales tax, it's the largest retailers, the brick and mortars, but also the largest online sellers, because they don't want the competition. If you're Amazon, you have a natural interest not to want the next Amazon to emerge, not to want the next small site to turn into a large site, to be fearful of sellers on, a variety of platforms. And we as conservatives should stand up to that, right? That's fundamentally antithetical to a free market. When you have large businesses trying to get government to crush their opposition by imposing a multi-billion-dollar cost on them doing business, we should stand up and say no.
Jesse, I'm going to ask you to shift gears because of something you said when you spoke. And that was, it sounded like we needed to be perceived as more empathetic. And that brought to mind George W. Bush's compassionate conservatism. You're a veteran of Capitol Hill and have watched all that work. What's your idea about how conservatives should project for young people in this area of compassionate conservatism?
Sure. So I think the point about empathy is really essential. There's a lot of polling done in the aftermath of the 2012 race, and some work by the Winston Group and others found that the number one issue conservatives, and you heard it this morning, the number one issue young voters identified about why they liked President Obama, why they voted for him, was they saw him as trying, right? And not succeeding, not accomplishing, but trying. And there's an emotional attachment that goes along with that. They believe that he understands his issues. In the MTV interview that Charlie referenced earlier, President Obama was asked, well, what are you doing to make it easier for people to start small businesses? And President Obama referenced a bill that allows for smaller investors to avoid SEC regulations and invest in new companies. That's the Jobs Act that Eric Cantor championed and passed through Congress. In an MTV interview, he took credit for what was fundamentally a Republican and conservative, a Republican piece of legislation that has conservative values. But it's not enough to gripe about the fact that he took credit for something that he opposed and a lot of Democrats and liberals opposed. Where were we talking about it? We should have been championing that. And that's, I think, a missed opportunity. That's the sort of empathy and communication I'm talking about.
Thank you. Well said. Francesca, there's a question in here that went off the screen. So it's about media outlets. I knew you would see it and have an interest.
I was like, I bet that one's for me.
Frankly, speaking more broadly, I don't think a lot of the folks that are above 35, sorry folks, but we don't have a clue about Red Alert and what other is out there. Would you just give us a rundown of what the media is doing for young conservatives, what's lacking? Just give us your landscape of all that, would you please?
Well, unfortunately, before Red Alert launched, there wasn't a whole lot, which is why we're able to exist and why we felt it was important to launch Red Alert Politics, because on the left, they do have a plethora of organizations and media publications for young people. On the right, besides Red Alert Politics, if you're not reading Campus Reform, you should be. It's a project of the Leadership Institute. I actually used to work for Campus Reform before we launched Red Alert, so everyone should check out Campus Reform. They're great as well, doing a lot of good investigative stuff on the college level. But going back to the main question I think that was down there too was what media outlets do young conservatives read and trust was the question. And the huge thing is I think there's not a lot that young people trust, period. Trust in media is down a lot. I don't blame them when every time you turn on the TV, half the time the stuff they're reporting is wrong and they have to issue corrections and say, oh no, the healthcare decision was decided the other way. Oops, our bad, so I think that there's not a lot of trust in media, but the ones that they do watch and they do listen, and this is really sad, The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert. I know. Listen, that's what Charlie said. He is completely right. This is not an exaggeration. We recently had an inside look at some polling, and this is hilarious but sad at the same time, of where young progressives set the people that they looked up to as philosophers. And number 2 was Jon Stewart. Number 3 was Stephen Colbert. I swear, this is real. And we wrote about it on redalertpolitics.com. You can go read about it. And that's what we're working with a lot of young people, is they think Jon Stewart is a philosopher. Whereas, don't worry, at least young conservatives, they actually said real philosopher. They said John Locke, they said Ayn Rand, they said Barry Goldwater, they said Reagan, but that just shows you like what young people are listening to and reading, and so we have to do a better job of at least creating something that can compete with that, not necessarily like a Red Alert, like maybe a TV station or something that can compete with that, or at least going on MTV or The Daily Show or SNL in order to reach those kids, because that's what they're watching.
Thank you. There's a question I'm going to do a derivative of here, and that is, like TV, each of you speak to this. What are the biggest gaps between older conservatives and younger conservatives on issues that are hot buttons that the younger conservatives really have little interest in, and the older conservatives have a lot, or vice versa? The younger conservatives, I think you've said a little bit about the internet and all that, but I'd love to hear what you think the biggest gap is and where.
I talk to a lot of young conservatives, and the biggest difference between older and younger, I'd have to say, is just foreign policy. Younger people, they don't necessarily don't care about foreign policy, but they do want to see national defense, but not international offense. So I think there's a fundamental difference between some of the older conservative crowd that might have pushed for an expansive foreign policy program, which did have legitimacy at the time and still might. But younger people are saying, if we want to be fiscally conservative amongst the GOP crowd, why don't we cut back on all programs in a very balanced way? And I think that there is some tension between some of the older conservatives and young conservatives in that way.
Yeah, so social issues, and especially how we talk about social issues. If you look at Mike Huckabee's appearance on The Daily Show, it, along with maybe John Yoo, are probably the two best examples of how a conservative goes into that format and comes across as both reasonable and effective, right? Really pursuing that argument. If you look at the issue of gay marriage, where it's just a non-starter for young voters, Charles Murray, when the ballot initiative came up in Maryland, and he blogged about this and he tweeted about this, he voted in favor of same-sex marriage. And the reason he voted in favor of same-sex marriage is for a profoundly pro-family reason. He's convinced by the arguments of people like Jonathan Rauch, who say that we ought to support and advocate for strong, stable partnerships that are raising children. That's actually a pro-family position. And if you keep talking about social issues in very narrowly defined and highly divisive ways, only talking about abortion and gay rights, it turns young voters off. And the polls bear this out.
Francesca, do you have something?
Well, I mean, I completely agree with what both of them were saying. Consistently, when I was traveling across the nation, covering the campaign, talking to young people, those were exactly the issues that they were saying turned them off. Particularly the issue of gay marriage was something that a lot of young people have just grown up, and that's something that for them growing up was a normal thing. They know a lot of people who are gay. They have a lot of gay friends. And so for them, it's just not an argument that's going to be winning. Not to say that conservatives should stop fighting for traditional marriage. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that that's not the message. If you're coming to a college campus, that you should plaster all over on the posters and reel them in with, that's just not a message that's going to work with young people.
Thank you. I teach college freshmen and college seniors in my appointment at CCU. And I like to say that the freshmen do new math pretty well. They take their age, which is typically 18, they multiply it times 1 trillion, and they get 18 trillion, which is, of course, our debt, federal debt. What's the gap? How do the under 35s look at financial issues, the debt, the deficits? Is it on their radar screen? Do they feel like there's a huge burden coming their way? How do they view those dimensions of financial issues? Charlie?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, because of Obamacare, they're going to be further insulated from that reality till they're 26, and that's a lot of them won't feel those kinds of negative policies or trouble finding a job because they get to stay at home with their parents. But I do feel a lot of young people do want to find a job, but we can go to messaging on this. And a lot of polling has been done, and capitalism is a bad word amongst young people. Free market is a pretty good word, but a great word is entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship in a young person's mind means that they come from something and create something of wealth. So they come from almost nothing and create something of wealth when they think of entrepreneurship. So when we think of messaging and branding, I think we need to think of less of, capitalism is unfortunately been a bad word because our school system has said, oh, those evil capitalists have made all these terrible financial crises that happen. But we talk about entrepreneurship and opportunity. Those are two big keywords for young people. And also one other thing that I wanted to add earlier, when we're selling something to a young person or any kind of demographic, we need to not tell the person that we're selling what they need to think. And this is an analogy I use. If you go door to door and you're selling aluminum siding and you talk to the person you're selling to, you're not going to tell the person you're selling like how to think or what to think. You're going to hear what they have to say, and then you're going to frame your sales argument to persuade them. And I think that too often we think we know, we meaning the conservative movement, what the younger generation wants, but we need to listen. If we go to a college campus, listen to what they have to say for the first 30 minutes, and then make the salesmanship argument.
Francesca, would you take that? What are you hearing on Red Alert about on the financial, the debt issues?
Unfortunately, most young people are completely insulated from that issue. It's not like someone's coming to their house asking them to write a $50,000 check. And so not having that happen, they don't understand how much they're actually going to be on the hook to pay back. And I think that's the big problem, is that we're not effectively communicating how much each person is actually going to be responsible for in their lifetime. And I do think another false issue that our party has spent a little bit too much time on with regards to that is this doubling of the student loan issue. Oh my gosh, talk about an issue that most young people don't care. If you think that that's the way you're going to win over the young people, that's completely wrong. It's false. That issue doesn't even affect most young people with student loans. It's ridiculous. Like, those are not like the issues that young people care about. What they do care about is the cost of college and how out of control it is. And this is actually something that a lot of young progressives are also agree with, like conservatives on, is that the cost of college is out of control. We've got to figure out a way to get the cost down. And if the cost was down of college, then we wouldn't owe so much in student loans, so there wouldn't even be an issue. And so if you're going to focus on issues of debt and deficit and everything, I think that's a really easy one to get all young people of all political parties involved in.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of work done in this area, particularly about how people hear numbers, and the short answer is really poorly, right? So the average person, if you're talking to them for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, can't really differentiate between very large numbers, 1 trillion, 5 trillion, 18 trillion. So over and over again saying we have, a $16 trillion national debt or an 18 trillion, whatever the exact number is, isn't effective. Yeah. What we need to do is talk about it in terms of practical costs, in terms of moral obligations, in terms of what happens if we fail to act. The Social Security check that won't come there for the elderly woman who's living on a fixed income. The high cost of medical care that's going to continue to erode our national economy if we don't fix the bad incentive structures that Medicare's system spreads throughout the healthcare system. There are ways we can talk about these issues that are effectively persuasive, and this isn't an issue limited to young people. I mean, young people have short attention spans, but everyone has a short attention span. Certainly more so than perhaps they used to. But humanizing those numbers is a way to make them have meaningful impact.
I have the privilege with some of the CCU folks here. If you don't get to work with young people, look, I'm an optimist because I work with young people. Quite frankly, I think they're going to do a better job of it than our generations have done. We hope so, do we not? We've not done very well with ours. So I hope with these three individuals, you capture a vision that the younger version not only isn't apathetic, but they're extremely well informed and have much to teach us, not in the hippie generation sense, but they're thoughtful, they've thought about the strategies, they thought about our problems, and we desperately need them to take the reins, not in the future, but now to integrate this. These three individuals, Francesca, Jesse, Charlie, awesome job, thrilled you came, wonderful, thank you for being here.